In Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, the president, announced the progressive use of force to confront the national strike maintained by various sectors of society. Following this decision, indigenous women asked the authorities to stop the repression. After his victory at the polls following the general elections on June 23rd, the Prime Minister-elect Dickon Mitchell was sworn in at the Grenada Trade Center. The United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the constitutional right to abortion enforced in the country since 1973. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Ecuador completed 13th days of anti-government protests. In this context, President Guillermo Lasso announced the progressive use of force to confront the national strike maintained by various sectors of society. Demonstrators from various social sectors have once again rejected repressive actions by the public forces in the capital, Quito, which last day left one person dead as a result of the impact of the pellets. The incident took place in the middle of mobilizations that were taking place outside the House of Culture and the National Assembly in the capital, and with this, there are at least 4 or 5 people dead who lost their lives during the national strike. The president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, stated on Friday that the forces of his government will employ all necessary resources to confront the national strike with the use of progressive force.
In defense of the citizens and the institutionality of a country, the national government will use all the legal resources that the law empowers it to confront vandals and criminals. The national policy is the armed forces will act with the necessary means to defend within the legal framework through the progressive use of force, public order, and democracy.
President Guillermo Lasso also dismissed the demands made by popular movements during the national strike, stating that they are only seeking to overthrow his government.
Yesterday's violence, the information we have received today, as well as his public statements, show that Mr. Isa's real intentions is not overthrow the government. This makes it clear that he never wanted to resolve an agenda for the benefit of the indigenous peoples and nationalities. The only thing he was looking for was to deceive his base and overthrow the legally constituted government.
During the day, Ecuador's Interior Minister Patricio Carrillo threatened the possibility of using lethal weapons against the protesters.
We're going to be obliged, and we're evaluating with the police command, the need to go to the new step. We can no longer continue repelling. We have to repress with progressive use of force. This implies the possibility of using rifles with multiple ammunition. That is not to say buckshot. This is not only authorized by law to progressive regulation of the use of force, but it is necessary because we're not longer facing demonstrations or protesters with an unsatisfied social demand.
After his victory at the polls following the general elections on June 23rd, Prime Minister-elect Dickon Mitchell was sworn in at the Grenada Trade Center. The Prime Minister-elect said that even as his new government will come with different ideas and approaches, he will make sure not to dismantle programs that especially benefit ordinary people the most. The leader of the National Democratic Congress said he will inform the Governor-General to declare today, June 24th, a public holiday or bank holiday so that citizens can celebrate Grenada's liberation and the victory they have won for Petite Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada. With Mitchell stated that from Monday, his administration will be working to rebuild and begin the process of transforming the country. And now let's learn a bit more about Dickon Mitchell, the Prime Minister of Grenada. 44-year-old Mitchell was born on October 8, 1978 in the parish of St. David. Mitchell graduated as a lawyer from the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill in Barbados. He recently elected Prime Minister, was a notary public of the state and honorary consul of the Kingdom in the Netherlands in Grenada. On October 31, 2021, Dickon Mitchell was elected the leader of the National Democratic Center Congress Party. And we have more on the matter. Venezuela greets the people of Grenada for the Democratic Day held on June 23rd, in which Mr. Dickon Mitchell was elected as the new Prime Minister. We send sincere congratulations and the commitment to continue consolidating ties of brotherhood with the peoples of the Caribbean, said Nicolás Maduro Moros, the President of the Bolivarian Venezuela Republic. And the government of Nicaragua sent congratulations to the recently elected Prime Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell, after winning the general elections. In the same context, Nicaraguan authorities also highlighted the way in which the people of Grenada exercised the right to vote, which was carried out with total normality. They pointed out that they wish to maintain the close cooperation with the Caribbean island based on solidarity and the sense of common regional identity, as well as sharing the vision of sustainable economic development and the social equity proposed by the elected Prime Minister and his party, the National Democratic Congress. In the same context, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, congratulated the National Democratic Congress NDC, the leader Dickon Mitchell, on winning the general elections in Grenada on behalf of his government and the people. Prime Minister Gonsalves, on his Twitter official account, also said he looks forward to working with the new government in advancing the regional agenda. On Friday, the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, CELAC, through a statement, congratulated to the elected Prime Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell, and all the Grenadian people for their democratic exercise, which passed without any incidents. In the same context, the regional organization announced their commitment to work together with all Caribbean countries to strengthen the cooperation in the region. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. As Venezuela observed this Friday the 201st anniversary of the Carabobo battle, President Nicolás Maduro Moros once again called for a civic military union. In a message sent to the armed forces, the Venezuelan president said that a Bolivarian army must be created in deep unison with the people, which was the fundamental idea of Commander Hugo Chavez in making the Bolivarian revolution. Maduro said that the national army is anti-imperialist by nature, that it stands as a firm defender of anti-colonialism and of the ideas of the founders of the Bolivarian homeland. He also said that the victory of Carabobo 201 years ago meant the birth of Colombia as a nation, as part of a geopolitical project to foster unity in South America around a political, economic, cultural, social, and military core.
With the victory of Carabobo, the birth of Colombia was completed. The project of the Great Colombia, the geopolitical project to generate the union of South America, around a block of forces, political, economic, cultural, social, and military.
The Venezuelan president also stressed the need to build an anti-colonialist and Bolivarian army.
At present, more than ever before, we must build an anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist, anti-oligarchic Bolivarian army. The Bolivarian army should more than ever before build on its historical morality, to tell the people its truths, for the construction of equality, independence, justice, freedom, the republic. Today we must build a united Bolivarian army in deep union with the people.
In Colombia, the liaison teams appointed by President-elect Gustavo Petro and the outgoing President Iván Duque meet for the first time to advance in the transition of government. During the meeting, Gustavo Petro's delegation, headed by the Vice President-elect Francia Márquez Mina, and the commission appointed by Iván Duque analyzed the projects that remain in execution and the current programs that adjust to the government plan of the new authorities. The political leaders indicated that the commission will concentrate on evaluating the fiscal deficit and everything related to the national defense, both issues considered a priority for Petro. During the meetings, 23 sectors of the country will also be reviewed, together with the state of the public institutions. On Friday, Brazilian indigenous communities held the funeral honors to Bruno Pereira and Dom Phillips, murdered for their work in defense of the Aboriginal peoples. Indigenous communities held the funeral of journalist Dom Phillips in Niterói, Rio de Janeiro, and that of the indigenous Bruno Pereira in Recife, in the state of Pernambuco. Sukuru people, with their ritual, chants, and customs, bid farewells to Pereira and Phillips, who were not only academics and experts, but also friends and advocates on behalf of the Amazonian native people. On June 18th, the Brazilian Federal Police confirmed the assassination of British journalist Dom Phillips and the Brazilian ethnologist Bruno Araujo Pereira, who disappeared on June 5th and were shot to death with a hunting weapon. We move on to other topics. Uruguayan dairy industry workers continue in strike over wage demands. The labor sector has been protesting for more than a week, demanding negotiations that lead to real wage increases and that the 18 months in which the workers' salaries have been falling with respect to inflation be taken into consideration. The Chamber of the country's dairy industry pointed out that the union is taking abusive measures that may cause shortages in some products, while workers maintain that wages cannot continue to be reduced while this sector of the industry is doing very well. Workers also pointed out that the number of exports in the last month increased.
The conflict that we have in the dairy industry, which means that for 18 months we have been losing wages within the dairy industry, in an industry that is steadily growing, where the latest figures in this year show that exports have grown in the last 5 months, reaching $350 million. In what does exports mean? An industry that has been growing, but due to the definitions of the Ministry of Labor and the Ministry of Economy in the management of the country through the salary guidelines, they place the salary laws to all the workers and to the retirees and pensioners, and in this scenario we have more than 20 working days in a whole year.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The United States Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to abortion, in force in the country since 1973. The ruling stated that the Constitution does not grant the right to voluntary termination of pregnancy, returning the power to legislate on abortion to the people and their elected representatives. The judges who voted to overturn the Roe v. Wade law insisted that they did not consider abortion a constitutional right, not a right supported by the history or tradition of the North Americans. In this context, with the approval of the ruling, states that choose to do so will be able to totally prohibit abortion in their territory. And there was a strong and mixed reaction across the states on Friday after the U.S. Supreme Court ended constitutional protections for abortion. Crowds gathered in downtown Atlanta and Detroit, with protesters decrying the ruling as illegitimate. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Boston to denounce the U.S. Supreme Court's decision ending the constitutional protections for abortion. In New York City's Washington Square Park, protesters gathered to protest the court's ruling and defend women's rights to decide. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren said Roe is dead, but the Supreme Court extremists will not have the last word at a protest in front of the State House in Boston.
Roe is dead. 6 extremists on the United States Supreme Court have decided that they can force all of America to bend to their personal religious and moral views. Roe is dead, but the Supreme Court extremists do not get the last word. We are here because we
We remain in the U.S. President Joe Biden on Friday slammed the U.S. Supreme Court for ending the right to abortion, accusing it of putting women's lives at risk in the name of an extreme ideology.
Named by one president, Donald Trump, were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view.
We move on to other topics. In Spain, the number of migrants dead after trying to enter the autonomous city of Melilla rose to 49. Authorities reported that the people died after trying to enter the country from Morocco by jumping the border fence in the autonomous city. Officials said that 57 other people were injured, while 133 migrants managed to enter the Spanish town. In this context, the governments of Spain and Morocco agreed to put an end to their diplomatic tensions over the issue of the Western Sahara and to resume cooperation on migration issues. And Patricia Scotland retained her position as the Commonwealth Secretary General, narrowly defeating challenger Jamaican Foreign Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith. Scotland was re-elected for a second term in office during the ongoing Commonwealth Heads of State and Government meeting 2022 in Kigali, Rwanda. Baroness Scotland received 27 votes against Smith's 23 votes, in a vote which had seemingly divided the 54 members of the Commonwealth. The recently re-elected Secretary General successfully managed to retain her position despite not being backed by the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, with analysts stating that her historic win shows the trust countries have in her to continue, having led the body through difficult times. And on his official Facebook account, Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit congratulated Patricia Scotland for her re-election as the Commonwealth Secretary General. Now we move on to other topics. Russian government highlights the strength of its energy industry in the face of unilateral sanctions by the U.S. and the European Union. Russia's energy minister Nikolai Shulginov emphasized the strength of the country's oil and gas companies, while assuring that the energy sector and the national economy continue to operate in a stable manner. Shulginov said that Russia's priority is to meet the domestic demand for fuel and develop stable ties with allied nations. The minister accused the U.S. and the European Union of causing serious complications to the global logistics chains and distorting the energy market with their illegal sanctions. teleSUR expands its signal with new satellite parameters. Since more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. These parameters are in place since June 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. So we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.